Hi, everyone. Sarah Forgany here, and joining me right now is John Moreno as spokesperson for CPS Energy. John, good morning.
Good morning.
So I got to tell you, there are so many angry customers, thousands and thousands. I'm sure you've been flooded with phone calls.
Yes, definitely. This is a unique situation for us here in San Antonio. We're not accustomed to, first of all, this type of weather. Secondly, the sustained outages for as long as we've had. So it is something that unfortunately it's happening because of the situation of the Texas electric grid and the mandate that we received from the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, ERCOT, to reduce, or what they refer to as shed load. And basically that means just um, outages for customers for longer durations than we would normally want them to be out for, or during a rolling outage.
Right. Uh, okay, I understand it is a new all-time winter peak demand record. And I also understand that it surpassed the summer peak demand, correct?
Yes,
But,
correct.
but we knew this winter storm was coming. We knew it was coming, and now there are thousands of people who are saying that simply you guys were not prepared for this. People have been without power for 30, 40 hours. I mean, we're not talking about, 40 minutes and an hour here and there.
Right. So I can tell you that months before this type of weather arrives, we weatherize our power plants to withstand and avoid any kind of freeze over. So I can tell you that the power plants here in San Antonio are running as expected. They're on and running. The situation is compounded when temperatures are extreme elsewhere and other power plants go down. That reduces the amount of electricity that's on the Texas grid. And as part of ERCOT, we have to comply and provide some electricity to that grid. Now, Sarah, the reason this happens is if we weren't if we didn't do rolling outages, then the actual electric state grid could fail on its own, and that could be devastating and catastrophic into not only days of power outage, but imagine this going on for 3 to 4 weeks of power outage while the Texas-wide grid tries to recover from this circumstance. So rather than let that occur, we understand that it's an inconvenience. We believe me, we're inconvenienced ourselves in our own home. We can't work and reply to customers like we want to. So instead of having a catastrophe event statewide, we want to control the outages, and this is how it happens. And unfortunately, it means customers are out for durations of time, sustained outages, and certainly it's not ideal. It's not ideal for anyone, but this is the situation we find ourselves in. It's not a matter of not being prepared. It's a situation where the demand is high. Our preparedness began on Wednesday when we started communicating with not only employees, but the community to please be mindful of what you're using. So if, as a customer, if you have electricity, don't use your heater at 75. If you can move it back to 68, it's still comfortable, but that's going to free up some of the electricity to be able to kind of keep us all safe in San Antonio. So those are some of the things that we encourage customers to do.
Now, John, I understand that you guys have to comply with ERCOT's rolling outages, but you do decide where the power is distributed. One of the biggest questions that I'm getting from so many of our viewers is, why have I been without power for 30, 40 hours? My neighbor across the street has power. How do you decide which neighborhood gets electricity? How does the system work?
Sure. So it's not decided by neighborhoods. It's 2/3 of our community is susceptible to rolling outages. 1/3 of our community are on circuits that are essential for operations of not only of City San Antonio, but emergency responders, as well as hospitals, Air Force bases, things of that nature where they cannot be without services because sometimes it's life-saving. So it's not that we decide which side of town we're going to turn off. It's all on a system on a computer, and it randomly turns off the power. When we tell our system we need 1,000 megawatts of electricity offline, it's going to immediately search for the circuits that are the largest, so we can quickly drop those 1,000 megawatts. The issue right now is we haven't been able to restore those 1,000 megawatts and then take down another 1,000 megawatts somewhere else because of the demand for electricity across the state, because of the weather temperatures. So I'll be honest with you, as long as the temperatures remain below freezing, we're going to continue to see this situation for the next day or two until the temperatures come up, or until there's so much conservation across the state that we don't need the rolling outages. So it's a unique situation. It's an unfortunate situation. It's not something that we wanted to be in at this time, but that's where we find ourselves. And these long durations of outages could be compounded with two things. One, it could be a traditional outage where it's a power line that came down or a transformer that malfunctioned. And customers are receiving calls that their power's back on because that issue may have been corrected, but now the customers find themselves in an area that has a rolling outage. So they're still technically in an outage, even though the original cause of it may have been out. During that time, they fell into a rolling outage situation, and that has compounded the duration of the outage altogether.
So you're saying there is not one zip code that is more affected than the other?
No, the zip codes that are near these critical infrastructures like hospitals and Air Force bases, if customers are near or on that same circuit, they won't be affected, not because they're favored, for lack of a better word, but because they happen to be on the same circuit as this critical infrastructure that we don't rotate outages to.
What about neighbor to neighbor?
So neighbor to neighbor could be an issue of just being on a separate circuit. If we were to repair a circuit, and the way our system is set up, your neighbor could be on a completely different circuit, depending on where you're at in town, could be on a completely different substation. So it's a system that's pretty complex, but it operates in such a manner that a neighbor may have services while another one doesn't. And it doesn't mean that they will continue to have service. It just means that if they're part of a rolling outage, they're going to be affected as well. But sometimes we can make a repair, and it just happens that your neighbor across the street may be coming on, but you're not, because you're on a different circuit, and we have not yet made it to that circuit, or that particular circuit is on a rolling outage.
So then let me ask you this. Shouldn't there be a better system where when it does randomly choose these certain areas, that it would recognize if you've already been through the rolling outages, now it's somebody else who hasn't dealt with it. So at least somebody gets a break and people have a chance to get their electricity for a little bit.
That's exactly how the system is designed to operate. So what you just said is exactly what it's supposed to do. 15 minutes off here, rotate to someone else. But because of the request and the amount of megawatts that we have to reduce, we don't have an opportunity to turn people back on. The system realizes that to comply and to keep the megawatts of energy off of our system here and onto the state grid, it has to maintain longer than acceptable power outage durations. And that's what's happening right now.
The original plan for ERCOT was something like 15 minutes on, 45 off. But we watched it go as Monday started. It was like that. And then that number was reduced. It went from 20 minutes to 15 to 10 to 5, down to, I believe it was 7 p.m. Monday, when a lot of people were getting 30-second electricity before it cut off again. You can't do anything with 30 seconds. Does that even help? What are people supposed to do with that, John?
No, you're right. There's not 30 seconds, even a few minutes is not acceptable. So what the system has gone into is just a sustained outage. And yes, when ERCOT put the word out that it was going to be a 15 to 20 minute rotating outage and then power back on, the trend that followed after that of sustained outages follows the trend of the weather pattern. So the colder it got, the higher the energy demand got across the state. So, customers were using more energy, obviously, to stay warm. So now that puts a strain on the Texas-wide grid. And in order to combat that, the outages have to be sustained for a longer period of time. Once the temperature subsides or goes above 32 degrees, we should start seeing an improvement in that, because customers now maybe don't have their thermostat set as warm as they have had. So it'll make a difference on the statewide grid. So the key here is, Sarah, is the less customers use on electricity, and I'm talking about the customers that have power, the less that they use, the more opportunity there is for the line for our system to sustain itself, and we'll be able to turn customers back on. once ERCOT gives us the go ahead.
So it sounds like you're putting the onus now on the people who have electricity, saying it's on you to reduce your usage so other people can get power.
So I know it comes across that way, but the reality is conservation is on everyone. The reason I said if you have power is because obviously the folks that don't have power can't conserve. They're frustrated. But, you know, in my home, I don't have power. I'm frustrated as well. But the reality is if I had power, then I would know that maybe if I just reduce a little bit, because instead of 72 degrees, maybe I could have it at 68. So it's not that we're blaming or putting the onus on everyone, but, you know, I've done a couple of these interviews and I've been asked, why is downtown lit up like a Christmas tree? So, you know, we are reaching out to commercial customers. We are reaching out to residential customers and asking them, if you can reduce your energy use, that's going to be extremely helpful, not only for our community, but for the entire state. So that's where we're at right now.
If you've been without power for the last 2 days almost, are these even considered rolling outages? I mean, they're flat out, you're just cutting electricity from people.
Correct. So ERCOT has changed the terminology from rolling outages to outages. So outages is what we're in, and actually, you know, we're in a long sustained duration outage.
So when did that happen? When was that changed?
I don't know the exact time. That's a question for ERCOT, but I can tell you that right now we are experiencing sustained outages in our community to maintain the level of megawatt reduction that ERCOT has requested.
So how many people are being affected by these sustained power outages?
So at last look, there was over 300,000 customers in our community that are experiencing the sustained or the long-term outages.
When we say long-term, what is long-term? How long is that going to take? Last we heard from you guys that this was going to go into Tuesday night, but we're expecting severe winter weather on Wednesday, possibly even into Thursday morning.
Yeah, there you go again. If the temperature is below freezing, these outages are going to continue. We're not able to turn services back on if it endangers the security of the Texas grid. Again, we can't do it if ERCOT says we can't do it. We've got to maintain it. So we were hoping when we put out the news that by Tuesday afternoon that the weather was going to improve. But you as well, I know that it doesn't seem to want to improve at least for the next couple of days. And unfortunately, this is a situation that we will continue to be in until the weather pattern improves.
John, I got to tell you, we're getting so many heartbreaking stories. I mean, you have elderly folks and obviously there's no heating system and it's freezing in there. You have people with babies and children. You have people who are relying on medication that relies on using electricity. What do these people do over the next few days?
No, I hear you, Sarah. We're getting the same phone calls. And, you know, we've got a team, our customer response unit team, that are reaching out to some of these customers directly and helping them in any way they can. If that means, you know, take them something that they need, food or whatever it is, then we're reaching out to them. So, you know, by calling our customer service, it's going to take a while to get through, but please be patient. But we completely understand what customers are going through, and we empathize with them because it's not a situation that we want to find ourselves in ever, to be without power. But right now, that's unfortunately the situation we're in. If someone does have equipment and life-saving equipment that's not functioning, or they think that their health is in danger, please, you know, call 911 and get the assistance you need. Because as I said, until the temperatures or until the weather improves, this is what the situation we'll find ourselves in.
So did I hear you correctly that those who have already experienced those rolling outages and then it turned into sustained power outages, that's going to be it? Those are the same people who are going to be affected over the next few days?
If for the immediacy, yes. And if we need to, we're going to call on more circuits, which would affect more customers, and they'll be turned off for those that haven't. And we're looking at more of the reduction of energy downtown by working with our large commercial customers to try to get them to turn off lights in their building to not use as much if they don't have to.
You mentioned you've been with CPS 25 years. Have you ever seen a situation like this?
So the last time we had rolling outages was in 2011. It was in February of 2011, but the duration of that only was a day or two, if I recall correctly. So it didn't last. It seems like this weather pattern, Sarah, hit us once, and then it's coming back and hitting us again as we go in through the next couple of days. And by hiddenness, again, I mean with temperatures below freezing.
So this is unprecedented pretty much for you guys. You're having to deal with something of this capacity for the first time.
Yeah, so it's unprecedented for the state of Texas. And it's a matter of fact, for the United States, if you look at what's happening, it's not, and I'm not saying they're experiencing rolling outages everywhere, but there are power outages throughout the United States because they're all weather related. So yes, it's something that San Antonio, Texas is not built for this type of weather. You know, this is Fargo, North Dakota weather. It's not something that we typically see here. You know, as I look out my window, there's still snow on the ground, and you know, when does that happen here in San Antonio? So the weather's playing a significant role in what's going on right now.
So
And,
realistically speaking, do you feel like you guys were prepared for this Arctic outbreak?
So because I mentioned that we did weatherize our power plants and we were prepared, yes, our power plants are, like I said, are still running. Only the power for those are being sent to the Texas statewide grid rather than just community of San Antonio. And that's not by choice. That's what we have to do as part of ERCOT. So, you know, whether or not the state was prepared, again, that's a question for ERCOT and what generation capacities they have in the state of Texas. But as far as CPS Energy, we always weatherize prior, and we feel pretty confident that our systems are going to sustain this cold weather for the next few days.
But it sounds to me that there needs to be, again, a system that's almost more fair in distributing the electricity across the board. So not one particular group is suffering so much while others are going on like, you know, there's no change in their life. I mean, have you guys had those talks that moving on in the future, we don't know if we're going to get hit with something like this again, that there should be a change in the system?
So everyone in those 2/3 of the community that is in the queue for rolling outages have been affected at one point or another, or are still affected. So the system that we have in place functions well. Obviously, there's going to be some lessons learned after this, and we're going to have to reevaluate that. But the system, ideally, 15 minutes on and then off, 15 minutes off and then back on, is how the system is ideally set up to work. But we find ourselves in a situation where we cannot restore power until we're allowed to by ERCOT.
What lessons would you say were learned from your experience?
Well, certainly it's too early to tell, but I mean, basically I could have probably gotten myself a generator and charged up my equipment so I can respond to you know, to interviews like this. But that, as far as company-wide goes, you know, we're going to sit down and we're going to evaluate. Our executive team's going to look at this situation, and you know, we're going to get better from it. And we're gonna communicate with ERCOT. We're gonna see how we can in the future improve and execute more efficiently for our community.
So if you're without power now, you should expect, realistically speaking, to be without power at least for another maybe 48 hours, possibly.
Correct.
Completely without power, no more rolling outages.
Correct. Until there's an opportunity. If for example, yesterday, and I don't remember what time of day, ERCOT was able to make a call that allowed 500,000 customers across the state to be restored, and that was spread out throughout all the communities. Some of them more here in San Antonio, but until ERCOT says, okay, we don't need X amount of megawatts anymore, we only need, you know, this much, then we can start restoring some of the circuits. But until we receive that phone call and that directive, situation is going to remain as is for the foreseeable future.
Now, have you all notified people that this is sustained power outages? It's no longer rolling? Because it seems from the messages I'm reading, people don't know that. Everybody's assuming that these are supposed to be rolling and no one understands what's happening. They're saying, I haven't had power and I don't know why. What's the issue?
So we've done it in a couple of different ways. We've used several channels. We've used our Facebook channel, our YouTube channel, all our social media channels. We put out a press release yesterday that media picked up and posted today. And in there, it does explain what's going on in this situation, and that the outages are going to last longer than anticipated.
And how do you know if you fall in the rolling outages group versus sustained outages group?
And so as a customer, you don't know. It's all done through our system. So, you know, even we don't know until our system, you know, does its thing and turns off circuits, because it's based on where we can reduce the maximum amount of megawatts at a time. So, you know, just as an example, if neighborhood A is on a circuit that our system sees is using a lot of energy, then that's the one that's going to be turned off. versus a neighborhood that, so we're trying to get the most megawatts offline as quickly as we can and sustain those offline for the duration.
Viewers want to know, will they be reimbursed? You have a lot of people who ended up with completely damaged pipes that have burst because no heating in their homes anymore. A lot of people lost a lot of things. Is there a chance that they might be reimbursed?
So Sarah, that's not a conversation to have right now. Our immediate concern is on, the situation that's going on in the community, making the repairs to the infrastructure that we can get to, because we're dealing with the road situation and different things. Customers can always call our claims department. They can do that online. So I can't comment to that and tell you what the situation is going to be like in the next few days.
Okay, we'll have to follow up on that, I guess, in the next few days to see if this is discussed by you guys. Are there other factors involved in the power outages that we're seeing right now?
Yeah, so there was a lot of outages that were caused by ice on tree limbs that made contact with power lines, snow in some situations, and I don't know of any, but I'm sure there was probably a couple of vehicle accidents, because that's usually a scenario in weather like this. But again, those overloaded circuits was another issue. And believe it or not, anywhere from 10 to 15% of our calls that we respond to can be just to reset the customer's breakers. So in a situation where they may have been out and the power came on across the street or their next door neighbor, but not their house, we have found that we went out there and we reset the breakers. So it's something to consider for customers is, please check your breakers. I'm not saying that's a fix all for everybody, but you want to at least look at that and make sure that you're not off just because the breaker's at your home.
Some people may have been prepared. Some people did not have the chance to prepare, and I would say that's probably the majority. What do you tell those people right now who are about to find out that they're not going to have power for many more hours? What do they do?
Yeah, again, I'll echo the sentiment of our CEO, Paula Gold Williams. We're sorry about the situation. It's not a situation that we plan to execute in this manner. The weather played a huge role in what's happening. Again, if you find yourself in a situation where you need assistance, medical assistance, call 911. If you have the opportunity to get to somewhere where you can get assistance, please do so. I know the city of San Antonio has information on some warming centers that they've opened up, and they may be a resource for customers for anything they may need.
What can people do to conserve energy so we can get the grid back up and healthier?
Yeah, so it's if they have energy, please be mindful of the temperature setting in your home. If you've got it at 75, try knocking it down to 68. That's going to help a lot if the community wide does that. And you can compensate that by putting something underneath the door or jamming some paper in between the door jambs when you got an air infiltration coming in through your door. Turn off lights in unoccupied rooms. Don't use your large appliances during the day, like even a washer and dryer or a stove, electric stove, or a dishwasher. Avoid using those as much possible. I say during the day, but maybe just throughout the day. If you can hand wash, whatever you have, that would be beneficial. It sounds like we're asking people to go to the basics, and in reality we are, because if you're not using electricity, then that's less electricity that we have to account for in our rolling outages.
So we're looking at, what's the latest you think we're going to have this issue?
So I don't have an exact time, and I really wish I did. I can only tell you that this pattern is going to follow the weather pattern. Earlier we mentioned it maybe by late today, but now it's looking like maybe through tomorrow. It's my understanding that we have another wintry mix coming in, and I'm not sure of the time frame of that, but once that comes in, that's going to continue this trend until that is cleared out.
Where do people call to report power outages if they're not sure if it's rolling or if they're sustained, or get questions answered?
Sure. So the quickest way to get to us is going to be online. If they happen to have their devices charged, reach us at cpsenergy.com. You can report your outage there. They can call us at 210-353-4357. That's the emergency line, and it is overwhelmed right now with phone calls. That's why I made the suggestion of using your tablet or your phone if you have that opportunity. But that's the line that folks can call to report.
I want to get back to the zip code thing real quickly, because that's been a really touchy subject for almost everyone.
Sure.
So if you have power and your neighbor across the street hasn't had power in 2 days and you've never lost power, what do you tell those folks? How is that decided again?
So a couple of situations. One, the folks that have power may be on the same circuit as some of the critical infrastructure here in San Antonio. That would include hospitals, Air Force bases, other areas like that. So it's not that we decide which zip codes. It's a system that again takes power off the grid based on where the majority of the consumption is, so that we can achieve our quickest reduction of energy use. So that's how that's decided. Again, if your neighbor has power, they may be on a different grid and a different substation altogether. If it's a result of what I would call a traditional power outage, pole down, power line down, transformer, and your neighbor's outage got restored and yours didn't, it may be that you're on a different circuit. So there's two things that are going on here. One is an outage that was caused by infrastructure faults, and the other rolling outages, which are now just sustained outages.
All right. Anything else that you think you would like to add, John?
Again, I just want to plead with the community, and I know this is going to be a difficult ask, is to please be patient. I mean, we are working as quickly as we can to get to the outages that we can get to because of infrastructure damage that we can restore. We're dealing with highway situations, road closures, long hours. So some of our guys are working on shift work, but we're working as quickly as we can. And our number one priority is to get through this demand or this request from ERCOT and get our power back onto our customers as quickly as we can.
Okay. John Moreno with CPS Energy, thank you for your time. We appreciate it, and I hope that we get a chance to follow up on this when things calm down a little bit in a couple of days.
Please, yes, thank you. Have a great day.
You too.